รายการเล็กๆเปลี่ยนโลกในวันนี้เราอยู่ที่ศูนย์ปฏิบัติการโรงแรมสารยาพาวิลเลียนเพื่อพบกับการประชุมวิชาการนานาชาติด้านการท่องเที่ยวและธุรกิจในหัวข้อ Sustainable and Creative Business Models ซึ่งงานประชุมนี้เป็นความร่วมมือกันของมหาวิทยาลัยชั้นนำจากต่างประเทศและวิทยาลัยนานาชาติมหาวิทยาลัยมหิดล
การประชุมครั้งนี้นะคะก็เป็นความพยายามของวิทยาลัยนานาชาตินะคะที่เราพยายามที่จะส่งเสริมการทำงานของบุคลากรนะคะซึ่งสอดคล้องกับนโยบายของมหาวิทยาลัยที่เราต้องการจะเป็นมหาวิทยาลัยที่มีมาตรฐานสากลครั้งนี้เนี่ยเราให้ความสำคัญกับการปรับตัวนะคะวิชาต่างๆที่แยกสาขาเราคิดว่าเราจะพยายามเอาจุดแข็งของสาขาที่เราจัดการเรียนการสอนเนี่ยมารวมกันเพื่อให้เกิดแนวคิดใหม่ๆขึ้นนะคะอีกส่วนหนึ่งที่สำคัญมากๆเลยก็คือเราอยู่คนเดียวไม่ได้เพราะฉะนั้นเราก็ต้องสัมพันธ์กับมหาวิทยาลัยในต่างประเทศซึ่งวิทยาลัยนานาชาติเนี่ยมีความสัมพันธ์กับมหาวิทยาลัยต่างๆเป็นร้อยนะคะ100 กว่าความร่วมมือเนี่ยเป็นระดับของวิทยาลัยกับวิทยาลัยซึ่งในด้านของการท่องเที่ยวการโรงแรมนะคะแล้วก็ภาคธุรกิจเนี่ยเราคิดว่าประเด็นของความสัมพันธ์มันจะต้องดึงมาจากทุกทวีปนะคะงั้นความพยายามหรือพัฒนาการของหลักสูตรของวิทยาลัยเองเนี่ยก็ได้มีความสัมพันธ์ถึงระดับหนึ่งนะคะที่ทุกฝ่ายก็สนใจจะมาร่วมกันแล้วครั้งนี้เนี่ยเป็นความพยายามของทางหลักสูตรนะคะที่จะทำให้ทุกภาคส่วนเนี่ยแล้วก็มาจากทุกมุมโลกได้มาพูดคุยแลกเปลี่ยนกัน
The topic of the conference, the sustainable and creative business models, are core topics of the tourism development. Especially sustainability is a core issue for the future development of tourism. Tourism businesses have to act and develop sustainable, otherwise in the long run there will be no future for tourism. Conference is an important starting point as well. Because we start discussing about these topics and hopefully the discussions will lead to a continuing process within the economy and the businesses and therefore to have a fruitful impact in the future development of tourism in Thailand and also in Switzerland. The conference is another important step of our collaboration between the Mahidol University International College and the Lucerne University of Applied Sciences and Arts. It will help to strengthen our collaboration and we hopefully can continue our collaboration and also to hold another conference in the future in Lucerne as soon as possible.
Today's conference will be about hospitality and how the industry as a whole has changed and will change into the future, how it connects horizontally with the new pillars that we have today to work with, including technology, including human resources, including digitalization, and including personalization and the power of consumers, and how this will change the environment of hospitality at large. The hotel and tourism industry in Thailand is a very important aspect of the economy. I do not know exactly how much, but it is significant. Thailand has a hospitality industry and a services industry that relates to hospitality that is most likely the largest one in Asia Pacific at this current moment. You have services such as hospitals, you have hotels, you have restaurants, you have airlines, you have travel agencies. They all connect. The transportation industry, they all connect to tourism.
รายการเล็กๆเปลี่ยนโลกในช่วงนี้ขอนำท่านผู้ชมพบกับการบรรยายในหัวข้อ Sustainable and Creative Business Models โดยได้รับเกียรติจากมิสเตอร์โลธาร์ ผู้ช่วยผู้จัดการใหญ่อาวุโสฝ่ายปฏิบัติการและกำหนดแผนงาน Starwood Hotel and Resort Asia Pacific แบ่งปันประสบการณ์แนวคิดและวิสัยทัศน์ในภาคธุรกิจด้านการบริการและการโรงแรมให้พวกเราได้ฟังกัน
The World Tourism Organization, hotel associations, the international hospitality and service company industry such as hotels, airlines, hospitals, and agencies all recognize the importance of tourism as a driving force for employment, international collaboration, and the economic benefits this industry brings to a country. Indeed, this industry provides unique and constantly changing business and career opportunities. So let me look how this industry actually, or how our business actually shapes up today. Given the international nature of tourism, our industry is at the forefront of embracing differences from culture, beliefs, traditions to language, all adding into a unique and diverse environment. The tourism industry and service industry are also amongst the fastest growing sectors in Asia Pacific, taking off on increased wealth and an eternal human desire to travel and explore. Needless to say, this will translate down the road into many new opportunities for graduates from universities, as a wealth of opportunities in the hospitality industry and other businesses unfolds. With this growth, there's a search for graduates to tourism and hospitality programs, to a point where today companies struggle to find talent. There's a particular lack of talent with a minimum of 2 language proficiencies, such as national language and English. If there would be more languages, that would even be easier. There's a lack of talent that has enough practical experience, functional experience. And it is fair to say that people that have experience in marketing, revenue management, IT business, finance will have no difficulties to actually find a job or find employment. In a world where 1 and 1 is never 2, we also welcome a shifting scope in our business. This industry is known as a work-hard environment, and it has transformed, or it will transform, into that of a strategic management that is rich in opportunities in a cross-cultural environment. This shift was created by globalization, with focus on monetization of services that equally transform as customers increasingly make their own decisions for their own personalized experience. I work for Starwood, and in Starwood we call this the age of great change, and we have made it a priority in our company that global personalization has to be a mandate in all of our development of experiences and services. But what has really changed? 2 words, the technology environment. We are at a cusp of events that are only matched by what was the world's industrialization. Today, we are part of a global digitalization through the internet, where powers to make informed decisions have moved into the palm of individuals. Today, there are more mobile devices than people on this planet. Today, each individual holds more information in his hand. Sometimes they are perceived as disruptors, but I believe we always have to see them as windows of new opportunity. So, the pillars of our business today have slightly shifted, and I could name them as such. The first pillar is the internet and content providers. Think of Google. The second pillar are technology providers, such as Apple, Samsung, and all of those companies that develop and provide the gadgets we love to use. The third pillar is social platforms. It is here where individuals express themselves, where they search and communicate. The fourth pillar is products and services. Our traditional hotels, they are mostly physical and tangible, and they are ultimately connected to the first 3. But who is the connector? The 5th category, the most important one. our human resources. It is them, it is us, who must be able to bring it all together and connect concepts, principles, and ever-changing consumer and customer expectations. So let me talk for 2 minutes on what has really changed. In my own mind, and simply speaking, we have evolved from company-centric products that evolved into branded products and services, and through technology today have now become personalized, consumer-enabled offerings. And our role as individuals, our role as educators and business leaders is to engage and evolve with these new technologies and with this new environment. Perhaps the best way for me to explain this is that when I look at how our roles and how our engagement with international and external guests has shifted, we have, due to compliance and regulation, moved from hierarchies into matrix organizations. Our directives that are placed by collaboration have gotten to know rules and regulations that embraced values of the human truth. The human truth saying people want to be in control. People would like to belong. Everyone would like to feel special, and everyone would like to express himself. And finally, each and every one of us and each and everyone on the planet would like to reach his or her own potential. All of the above combines into our new work environment of today. As we talk, new jobs not known only 1 decade ago, such as revenue managers, digital executives, directors of corporate and social responsibility, lurkers, and RevPAR analysts have emerged. These jobs are indeed born as hospitality no longer operates in a vacuum, but is an industry that more and more is connected. We are more connected today than we have ever been before. And it is connections that are the driving force of change and improvement in our business models and in the expected diversification of functional skills and expertise. Hospitality managers today care about their environment, both socially as well as culturally. They embrace the community they live in and provide an international perspective with local opportunities. With such new value drivers, a hotel's success increasingly depends on external factors that merge with internal factors and its unique selling points, the services and features of the building, and that is delivered by its associates. But as we all know, shifting from old to new paradigms is difficult, especially given that executives that have created the existing principles have a strong vested emotional equity in what exists. With an operating environment that consists of ecological, economic, political, socio-cultural, and technological categories, we, individuals engaged in this profession, want to bring them all together with our unique products and services. We like to bring them to our customers, our suppliers, our regulators, and our people. I am personally engaged in formulating strategy and implement plans for our talent at Starwood Hotels, so to acquire the core competencies into the future.
We all can improve all the time. It's not a country that improves, but it's an industry that is improving. Today, we are all connected. Digitalization has made the world one global marketplace. It's no longer about the physical borders of a country, but it's about the borders of technology and the engagement of customers individually, because customers make their own informed decisions today. If a consumer would like to travel, he or she will use their own digital devices and use the internet and get informed based on what they are looking for. If they would look for a spa vacation, Then they will go onto the net and will look at spa vacations across the world. And based on the decision that they want to make a spa vacation, they will trace back and look for hotels, for airlines, for the weather, for the language, and identify where they think their pocket and their interests will lead them. So Thailand, as much as any other nation in the world, and the hospitality products within Thailand need to evolve, need to align to customer expectations, and need to be able to deliver what the consumer thinks he would like to experience.
กลับมาสู่รายการเล็กๆเปลี่ยนโลกกับการบรรยายในงานประชุมวิชาการนานาชาติ Sustainable and Creative Business Models โดยวิทยาลัยนานาชาติมหาวิทยาลัยมหิดล
เรื่องการท่องเที่ยวเนี่ยมันเป็นสาขาทางเศรษฐกิจสาขาหนึ่งนะครับที่ช่วยสร้างรายได้เป็นเงินตราต่างประเทศเข้าสู่ประเทศหลายปีมาแล้วฮะการท่องเที่ยวเป็นสาขาที่ดึงเงินตราต่างประเทศเข้าประเทศไทยมากเป็นอันดับหนึ่งติดต่อกันมาหลายปีมากกว่าการส่งข้าวออกมากกว่าการส่งออกผลิตภัณฑ์อิเล็กทรอนิกส์นะครับโดยเราคาดว่าน่าจะมีนักท่องเที่ยวปี 58 เข้ามาประเทศไทยเพิ่มขึ้นจากปี 57 ไม่ต่ำกว่า 13% นะครับก็คงจะประมาณสัก 28 ล้านคนนะฮะนอกจากนั้นเนี่ยคนที่เข้ามาประเทศไทยพวกนั้นเนี่ยจะสร้างรายได้ให้กับประเทศไม่น้อยกว่า1.3 ล้านบาทอันนี้คือสิ่งที่เราประมาณว่าน่าจะเกิดขึ้นได้พอมารวมกับการคาดการณ์ว่าคนไทยจะเที่ยวไทยด้วยกันเองในปี 2558 รวมแล้วเนี่ยน่าจะทำรายได้ให้กับประเทศจากสาขานี้ไม่ต่ำกว่า 2.2 ล้านบาทนะครับอันนี้คือสิ่งที่เราคาดหวังจากอุตสาหกรรมท่องเที่ยวในปี 2558 ครับ
Today I'm going to be talking about really the role that government, the tourist and industry, plus we as educators have to play in developing a much more sustainable tourism sector. And the important thing is that sustainability is a process, it's a journey. And Thailand's well on the way to starting the journey. And I'm going to be talking about things that can be done to move us forward, to move along that journey. On one hand, Thailand has it all. It's got a fantastic destination image, it's got great access, it's got great product, it's got great service, and it really is well situated to be one of the top destinations in the world. But on the other hand, in this part of the world especially, with so many other places that are just starting to develop, that because Thailand's been in the game for so long, maybe some of its infrastructure is getting a little bit tired. And some new places are developing with brand new 2013, 2014, 2015 infrastructure. And in some cases, some of the facilities in Thailand need to be upgraded a little bit. But overall, you know, Thailand's recognized as the leader certainly in this part of the world and as the model for many other destinations. So overall, it's very positive.
ในช่วงนี้เราจะได้ฟังทัศนะจากวิทยากรและบรรณาธิการวารสารด้านการท่องเที่ยวชั้นแนวหน้าของโลกศาสตราจารย์ Bob McKercher จาก School of Hotel and Tourism Management Hong Kong Polytechnic University.
I've been set the challenging task of trying to set the tone for the conference. And before beginning, just let me start by giving you a little bit of background about me. First off, I work in a business school and specialize in teaching the business of tourism. As mentioned, I'm a tourism guy. I'm not a sociologist, I'm not a biologist, I'm not an environmentalist. And not only did I spend 25 years as an academic, but I worked for 10 years in the industry. So I've been in tourism for about 35 years. And in fact, when I had these and didn't have this, I was involved in the nature-based tourism sector. I was a ski instructor, ran bicycle tours and cross-country ski tours and hiking tours. And then when these went, and this came, I did a transition to becoming an academic to thinking about tourism more. So with that in mind, it's important to appreciate that tourism is an economic activity that destinations and governments pursue for the economic benefits. But in doing so, tourism also provides and produces a range of positive and negative social, economic, and cultural impacts. And the challenge of sustainable tourism, more than anything else, is to try to achieve the best balance between these. Tourism's not a neutral activity. And to understand where the idea of sustainable tourism and sustainable development came from, for those of you especially who are young, you have to go back 30 or 35 years. And during the 1980s, it became increasingly clear that major global environmental changes were occurring suddenly and silently, and that they had not been predicted by scientists. And the world became aware more and more that there was an element of uncertainty and risk in relation to the effect that a range of human activities were having on the global environment. And to rectify these changes, some fundamental rethinking of our lifestyle was required. And the concept of sustainable development came from here. It was first coined in 1987 in a report published by the World Commission on Environment and Development, or more commonly known as the Brundtland Report. And it defines sustainable development as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And as somebody who began working in sustainable development about 1986, this definition has both been a guiding principle and a horrific burden. And it's been a horrific burden partly because it's such a vague term that how do you implement it? And the report identified a number of principles. The idea of intergenerational equity, that your generation should have the same access to environmental values as my generation and that future generations should. Public participation instead of imposing the will. Environmental protection, dealing uncertainty with risk and dealing cautiously with risk, especially in situations where environmental impacts of activities aren't known. The preferred option is to deal cautiously or not at all until we know what the impacts are going to be. And also other issues of moving away from using non-renewable resources to using renewable resources when we can, and if we're using non-renewable resources, to use them in the best way possible. One of the things that hasn't happened in 30 years is we still haven't gotten rid of plastic cups. They say that the plastic cup is biodegradable. It's true if you sit it out in the sun for 3 weeks, but when you put it in landfill and cover it, it's not biodegradable. The issue of sustainability has become even more challenging now with the emergence of climate change as the first truly global environmental crisis that we face. In the past, ecological crises were localized, incredibly severe, but local with local causes and local impacts. Even something as horrific as Chernobyl was and still is a largely local environmental issue. And so while the impact of local crises may be huge on a small scale, their impact globally can be easy to ignore. However, with climate change, the equation has changed. It's no longer a rich versus poor, north versus south, developed versus developing world issue. It's everyone's concern. We're all guilty as contributors, and we're also all going to have to deal with the consequences as victims. And make no mistake about it, climate change is real, and the consensus amongst the best scientists in the world is that human interference with the climate system is occurring, and that climate change poses both risks for human and natural ecosystems. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has identified tourism as both a contributor but also a potential victim. Now, as a causal agent, it's estimated that tourism contributes about 5% of total carbon emissions. And 5% really doesn't sound like much until you consider it in terms of other contributors. And if tourism was a country, it would be the 5th largest emitter of carbon emissions globally, only behind China, the United States, India, and Russia. Now think about that for a second. Each one of us may travel, and each one of us may feel that we're a small potato, but collectively, the tourism industry, not just the aviation sector, but the aviation sector is a large contributor, but the tourism industry as a whole is the 5th largest producer of greenhouse gases that are affecting climate change. And it's for this reason that tourism has been targeted as an activity that can be eliminated to reduce our carbon emissions. In fact, some people are saying, if we didn't travel, we don't have to travel, so therefore stop traveling and we can reduce carbon emissions overnight. Of course, this is a rather narrowly based argument because so many economies are economically dependent on tourism that if people didn't travel, the global economic consequences would be much worse. And this is also what the Intergovernmental Panel says. Climate change will affect tourism resorts, particularly ski resorts, not an issue for Thailand, but also beach resorts and nature resorts. And it says the impacts are going to be direct on tourist infrastructure, hotels, access roads, on operating costs, heating and cooling systems, irrigation, food and water supply, on emergency preparedness requirements, and on business disruption, especially on sun and sand and sea holidays. Indirect costs are going to be huge, especially with the results of extreme events on biodiversity and landscape change, which will affect the very product that we sell. Now, remember, one of the things about the commercial tourism industry is that hotels, airlines are not tourism. They are facilitators of tourism. And it's very rare that the commercial sector for anything is a facilitator of the experience rather than the experience themselves. I don't know very many people that get into a plane and say, wow, I really feel like sitting for 14 hours to eat plastic food just because I love flying. Almost everybody gets in a plane because they say, I want to go to somewhere. I want to have to come back to somewhere to go back to work. Flying's the way that can facilitate that. You think about hotels. Hotels are very much into experience provision, but very few people book a hotel because they like hotels. They book a hotel because it facilitates your ability to explore Bangkok or Pattaya or Hong Kong. So the commercial tourism industry is the facilitator of the experience and not the experience. Tropical areas in particular are especially at risk from climate change. Likely an increase in maximum wind speed, tropical cyclone, weather events, beach erosion, coral bleaching, etc. And the issue is going to be even more pronounced in this part of the world. Asia and Southeast Asia is going to be the engine of growth for tourism. While tourism is forecasted to grow 3 to 4% per annum globally, it's going to grow 6 to 8% in this part of the world. And even Boeing Aviation says that the number of aircraft are going to double in the next 15 years, and 2/3 to 3/4 of all new aircraft purchases are going to be by nations in this part of the world. And so the reality of a changing global climate, plus dramatically increased demand for tourism in this region, means that sustainability must move from becoming a buzzword into a core business practice. But sustainability is a journey. It's not an endpoint. We can always develop more and more sustainable practices. The journey towards sustainability as a sector has to begin now. We've been talking about it for 30 years. And in principle, tourism should be ideally suited to lead the way in sustainable practices. I say this in principle. Apart from transport, tourism really doesn't consume additional non-renewable resources. It transfers use from home to the destination, but it doesn't necessarily consume more. The community's resources, its culture, its shops, its leisure facilities are the core products that tourism has to offer. And so, again, its incremental impact doesn't have to be that much. For many places, it represents a real economic opportunity, and in some places, the only economic opportunity. And if done right, tourism can enhance the quality of life for local residents and tourists alike.
I think from a consumer point of view, from a tourist point of view, being a member of a free trade zone, I think is perceived to be something positive. Because under ASEAN, then there would be guidelines, there would be rules, there would be quality assurance mechanisms. So I think all these would be welcomed by tourists. So countries would need to upgrade the quality in terms of training, in terms of, for example, accreditation and other aspects. So I think all these should be welcomed by tourists, by foreign tourists. So I think from that point of view, this is something which would be a positive impact on Thai tourism.
กลับมาพบกับการประชุมวิชาการนานาชาติโดยวิทยาลัยนานาชาติมหาวิทยาลัยมหิดลกันต่อในการบรรยายช่วงต่อของศาสตราจารย์บ๊อบแมคเคเชอร์วิทยากรพิเศษระดับแนวหน้าของวงการการท่องเที่ยวของโลกจาก School of Hotel and Tourism Management Hong Kong Polytechnic University.
But historically, much of tourism has been sustainable, and many initiatives undertaken to encourage sustainable practices have accomplished little. And in fact, today, few, if any, tourism products are sustainable, and fewer, if any, destinations can be called sustainable. And not only that, but tourism on a global scale seems to be moving further away from sustainability rather than closer to it. There are many reasons, but I'd like to focus on three key issues today and have you think about them. The first one is the vagueness of the term sustainability. Perhaps this is the most pressing issue because sustainability is one of these terms that everybody knows, everybody uses, everybody supports in principle, but almost nobody understands it. And it's a classic case of an issue that is well known, but not particularly known well. A couple of years ago, we did a study of over 2,000 tourism and hospitality students from 63 universities in 21 different economies. And we asked these well-educated, well-aware students to identify a single cause of climate change. And this is what we found, that only 1/3 of the students could identify a real cause, such as carbon emissions, burning fossil fuels, etc. Half of them identified generic causes. Pollution causes climate change. Human activity causes climate change. 5% said impacts were causes. Global warming causes climate change. Climate change causes global warming. Melting ice caps cause global warming. And about 12% of them identified reasons that had little to do with climate change. Earthquakes cause climate change. Ozone layer depletion causes climate change. While they're related, there's no causal relationship. Now, that was very instructive, and it was instructive because if you don't know what the cause of a problem is, then you can't solve the problem. Two competing perspectives on sustainability are still vying for dominance. One argues that sustainability can be defined by ecological sustainability or the constant natural capital approach, where over time the total amount of natural assets we have cannot be diminished. But there's a competing argument that argues that economic development or a constant wealth approach can occur. So natural assets can be depleted as long as they generate wealth. In other words, the status quo. Both use the same word, but use it for quite different meanings. Here in Thailand, some of the research has shown that sustainability for government agencies means infrastructure and economic development. For business, sustainability means revenue generation. And for community groups, sustainability means quality of life. In fact, in 1993, one of the first things I ever wrote as an academic was this: the inherent vagueness of sustainability is its greatest weakness. At present, it's being used by both industry and the conservation movement to legitimize and justify their existing activities and policies, although in many instances they are mutually exclusive. Rather than acting as a catalyst for change, sustainability may serve to entrench and legitimize existing policies and actions, thus making the situation worse rather than resolving the issue. Today in 2015, unfortunately, that statement still holds true. So if part of the issue is we don't know what sustainability is, and there are two competing issues of as long as we generate wealth, then we can continue to destroy the natural environment that's sustainable, or maybe we don't need to generate wealth, maybe we need to conserve the natural environment, that's sustainable. In fact, neither one of them is. Sustainable development has to have an economic as well as a conservation approach. So the second issue then that arises is, how do you measure sustainability? Because the issue itself is so vague and so broad, the challenge of how to measure it becomes huge. But without a set of measurable and identifiable and quantifiable indicators, then how can you set a roadmap to move from a less sustainable to a more sustainable environment? And how do you know if you're moving in the right direction? And it's no easy task. The challenge is that because tourism is so broad, because there's so many indicators, that you can pick and choose which one you want to follow and which one you don't want to follow. So you can say, oh, because I'm not involved in human trafficking, then I must be in sustainable business, even though I'm flushing raw sewage into the ocean. It also means two other things. The first thing is that people can set their own standards as to what is or isn't sustainable, even if they're largely meaningless. The second thing is that people who want to act don't know which direction to go because the issue is so complex. Many of the other issues that relate to sustainable tourism practices are really beyond our ability, especially the ability of individual enterprises to resolve. One of the other issues, too, is that some actions may deal with symptoms, but not necessarily with causes, and some may deal with outcomes, but not necessarily with causes. Recycling is great, but recycling doesn't address the issue of over-packaging or over-consumption in the first place. Carbon offsetting is something that airlines are trying to push, and carbon offsetting is something that some travel agents are trying to push. And it's a feel-good action, but it doesn't address the issue of consumption. So the question is, can we do better? And that leads to the third issue of who is responsible for what. And moving towards sustainable tourism has to involve government, industry, and the tourists. And it also has to involve us. Let's take a look at government's role first, because its role is pretty clear, but also very muddy. Government can set policy, government can enact legislation. And in fact, tourism departments, including the TAT, are usually at the forefront of trying to push governments into behaving in a more socially, ecologically, and sustainably responsible manner. But there's a challenge. For sustainable development must be system-wide. And tourism departments rarely have the legislative authority to address issues that fall outside of their mandate, of water quality, of air quality, of engineering issues. Before I started to teach, I ran a trade association for wilderness lodges in Canada, and my job was to lobby government to protect wilderness values. And over and over and over again, we were reminded that your government is only responsible for tourism. Your ministry is only responsible for tourism. Don't talk to them about education because they can't do anything. Don't talk to them about taxation because they can't do anything. And unfortunately, policy implementation by its nature is fundamentally political and therefore fundamentally short-sighted. And here both small p and big P politics come in. Political trade-offs have to be made to get things through. And powerful blocks can stimulate or stifle legislation. And so while governments can try to act, they need to be pushed. Plus, one of the things I've also learned in 25 years of dealing with and around governments is that governments rarely learn from each other. Different governments have been developing sustainable tourism policies for 25 years and trying to implement them, and yet the results have been rather disappointing because more than anything else, each government that has sought to develop a sustainable policy has done it from ground zero, not from learning from what other governments have done. And this is where we as academics who have looked at other policies can play a clear role and can advise. And in fact, when you look at the TAT's 7 Greens policy, it's a fantastic policy and certainly highlights the role that tourism can and must play in more sustainable Thailand. But it's also an initiative from one government department alone that not necessarily has been supported by other government departments at a national level, other government departments at a provincial level, and local governments that have to implement it. And because of that, progress has been slow, although there has been some progress towards it. Now, the other issue, or the other third of the triangle, is industry. And industry's role is clear. And in fact, in many ways, industry is leading the way, and industry can lead the way. And when we talk about sustainable business practices, there are many, many examples of industry moving above and beyond simple legislative mandates. Why? Because it makes good business sense. Can reduce operating costs, can enhance the visitor experience, can protect the very resource that businesses depend on, and can also show a commitment to guests of how to be good corporate citizens. And some of the actions have been criticized by some members of industry, but others have been praised. Cathay Pacific and Singapore Airlines have banned shark's fin from their cargo flights. It's a small action, maybe it's a symbolic action, but it's an action by an airline that says this type of activity is no longer ethical. Many hotels in Hong Kong have stopped serving shark's fin soup and are offering guests an alternative. And so far, nobody's complained about lost businesses. Other hotels are donating their waste food to homeless shelters instead of throwing it out so that the food does not get discarded. But such actions are not without risk. And few businesses are willing to be first movers because they are afraid that if they move first, the financial risk might be weak. And this is why industry pushes government for system-wide legislation. The few bars that took the bold move to go smoke-free first lost business. The bar owners said, oh, Look what's happened to them. If we go smoke-free, we're going to lose all our business. What happened when no smoking legislation was introduced across the system? No impact at all, except at a couple of karaoke bars. If everybody has to do it, everybody will be happy to comply. But also industry feels helpless. It feels caught between the consumer that really doesn't care about green products. All the research says, yes, the consumer does, but they really don't care. And suppliers who really don't know what to provide. And this leads to the next, which is the consumer, it's him or herself. And maybe we, you, me, everybody else in Bangkok, everybody else who travels the world, represents the greatest challenge. Because we're an incredibly intrinsic part of the equation, but we don't act very well. While a growing number of consumers may say they're aware of their impacts and want to do the right thing, they don't know what to do. The other thing, too, is that people have a real hard time making a link between the impact, the contributor, and their own behavior. It's a classic example of the small potato syndrome. I'm just a little guy, so my actions don't make much of a difference. We're aware that carbon emissions are produced by aircraft, but we very rarely make the link that the fact that we're sitting in the plane is the cause of carbon emissions. The plane's flying anyway, so the seat's empty or full, it's no different, so I might as well make it full. Canadian tourists are aware of the social and environmental consequences of their behavior, but want to go and see polar bears to look at the impact of climate change firsthand without realizing the contribution their trip is making to see climate change. And I see so many people and hear so many people who want to go to Antarctica to look at the impact of climate change without realizing that the act of going to Antarctica itself is probably the single worst environmental crime they will commit in their life. Is that many of these subjects remove the individual or the personal element when talking about tourism impacts. They talk about a generic tourism industry producing generic social and environmental impacts on generic communities due to the generic actions of tourists. But they never talk about what my actions cause to this community or what your actions cause to another community. And in fact, one of the things that happens from the subjects that we teach, we actually instill the idea that you can transfer blame and responsibility to somebody else. It's their problem, it's not my problem. But when we're talking about 1 billion tourists who traveled internationally last year, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 10 billion people who took domestic trips, it's not somebody else's fault. Change has to happen with each of us. If I can change my behavior a little bit, and everybody else can change their behavior a little bit, then collectively the impacts are going to be huge. And that brings us down to the final point of this presentation. What does it all mean? And how does sustainability and creative business models work? Yes, we have a very real problem, and a very real problem that is now global in nature. Yes, governments may lead, but politics will often get in the way of action. Consumers are keen, but they don't necessarily know what to do. And in fact, in many ways, it's up to business to develop sustainable business strategies that lead by example. Not all businesses are willing to do that, but the good businesses are saying, this is the legislation, I'm going to ignore it, that's ground rules. I'll go 10 steps beyond what the legislation says because it's good business practice. And yes, we as academics have a role to play, but we can do that job much more effectively by instilling into our students that they individually are responsible for causing impacts and are also individually responsible for helping resolve the impacts. As individual tourists, as people who are going to be role models for their classmates and other tourists, and when they get into industry, for the businesses that they're going to be working for. Sustainability is a process. It's a journey. And we each have a responsibility professionally and personally to help move along that journey. And more, the time to say it's somebody else's problem has passed. It's up to us. It's up to us to lead when we teach, but it's also up to us to lead when we act.
Yeah, and certainly, the airport here, the international airports has gateways, the airline access. For tourists to be able to get to a place is one of the two most important things. The second is the product. The other thing too that's a real opportunity for Thailand is its proximity to both India and China. And they're going to be the two markets that are going to drive tourism for the next 30 years. And because Thailand's so well situated, the issue is going to be as much controlling the number of tourists and encouraging tourists. The other thing too that's a real strength in Thailand is the TAT, and its commitment to sustainable development is essential, because without a sustainable tourism sector you just don't have tourism. And the TAT is really taking a lead in pushing the rest of the industry to follow its lead.
I think there are two aspects. Free trade, of course, means that everyone is now on level playing field. So you cannot unilaterally impose certain things on other countries. You need to have a common set of regulations governing your relationship with other ASEAN countries. At the same time, ASEAN would also have some standards which everyone will have to abide. And these standards, I think, is some kind of a consumer protection. Consumer would feel more safe, would feel more confident to come here because they know that there is this system in terms of, for example, hotel accreditation, in terms of aviation safety, in terms of, for example, training of staff in the hospitality industry, food safety. All these, I think, are very important issues. And I think today every country needs to have very high standards in order to attract tourists. So from that point of view, I think Thailand would probably do well compared to other ASEAN countries, even though you have to compete on a level playing field. But because Thailand, I think, has a very well-developed hospitality and tourism industry, and it has a very good reputation. So with the new ASEAN requirements, I think it should further enhance its competitiveness. So I think Thailand should welcome this development in the tourism area.
ท่านผู้ชมที่สนใจสอบถามข้อมูลเพิ่มเติมเกี่ยวกับการประชุมวิชาการนานาชาติด้านการท่องเที่ยวและธุรกิจได้ที่หน่วยงานประชาสัมพันธ์งานสื่อสารมวลชนวิทยาลัยนานาชาติมหาวิทยาลัยมหิดลโทรศัพท์หมายเลข02-441-5090 ต่อ 1116 หรือ 1413 หรือผ่านทางเว็บไซต์ www.muic.mahidol.ac.th